just want to start out by saying thank you to Alex for asking me to join his webinar today. Advocacy is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. I believe strongly in advocating to support people. I think that's, one of the highest callings that a person can provide. And thank you for letting me do that. So I want to just start out by introducing myself. I've worked for over 30 years in accessibility resources in the post-secondary setting. I've been an interpreter, a sign language interpreter for 27 years. So again, advocacy and access is huge. It's a huge part of being an effective interpreter. And the thing that first attracted me to interpreting is I realized that when I interpret something and a deaf or deafblind person has access to communication, that they're able to participate, they get to contribute and they get to make decisions in their lives and give back to their communities and their society in an independent manner. And to me, when the first step to being an advocate is providing advocacy. So I kind of labeled my talk today, access, advocacy, and action. And who doesn't love action? I mean, we all want action of some shape or form in, the personal things and projects that we have or in our businesses. So I want us all to think about, being able to advocate for people. We first have to give them access to situations. And then when those things happen, we can have all kinds of great action. And trying to make my slide. There we go. So I like this quote from Roxane Gay, who's a writer for the New York Times. And the quote is, "A seat at the table means that you are part of a conversation and that you have as much to say as anyone else around the table." So what I want to really impress upon people is the first thing we have to think about is we need to get people to the table. That's what we're working on first and foremost. And if you can give them access, that is a huge part of advocacy. So I want everyone to just kind of think about that as we go through the next few slides. The other thing I wanted to point out is when you think about, people with disabilities, I was really thrilled to be able to talk today. And I have invited another friend of mine. It's a deafblind woman that I've worked with. And a lot of us haven't had the opportunity to work with people with disabilities. So it's often something that's overlooked and that you don't think of. But when we look at this graphic and you think about the fact that 26% of adults in the United States have some type of disability, that's essentially 1 in 4 people. That's 61 million adults in the United States. So when you think of it from a business standpoint, not to mention a human aspect, how can we not afford to include all of these people in your work and in your programs? So, all of this information, I think, kind of supports why advocating and giving people access is so important. Going to the next slide. Wait for the slide to come up. Let's see. Oh, here we go. So what does accessibility mean? What does accessibility mean? It means a lot. And the disability community is very diverse. I primarily work with folks that are deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind, but advocacy covers a lot of different areas in the disability community. But I think the thing we need to remember is we want to strive to make the experiences of people with disabilities the same as they are for people that don't have disabilities. So when you create accessible, inclusive events, all the participants will have an equitable experience. So if we're eliminating barriers to participation, all the attendees will be able to fully access the event without modification or special request. So this is going to create a positive experience. And when we create these inclusive experiences, then participants feel welcome. So conversely, when there's barriers and people aren't able to participate, it makes people feel unwelcome, and they're a lot less likely to return or recommend something like an event to a friend or a colleague. And again, in a business setting, this is a big deal. So it's where you're having a workshop or a presentation, it's some important things to remember. So we talked about what are the different kinds of accessibility. There's physical access. Can they get in the building? Are you on a bus line? Is there an elevator once you get into the building? Is the furniture set up so that people can maneuver throughout your event venue? All of these things make a difference. Are your registration materials and documents accessible? There's a lot of accessibility checkers online. You can run documents through and they can tell you when things aren't accessible. For example, there are screen readers that read PDFs and they need to be set up in a certain way. There are certain fonts that read better with a screen reader. For example, sans serif fonts like Calibri and Arial, those are good ones. Other fonts like serif fonts like Times New Roman, which is very popular, is not as accessible. So you also want to consider, if you have registration materials and documents, having them available in other formats, or that you may be asked to have them available in other formats. For example, Braille, or maybe large print, large font. Some people may request documents in advance so that they can have a chance to peruse them using technology if they're going to be attending an event in person. And then we move on to the next thing. The next topic is media. So if you're using any kind of media, you want to make sure you're turning on the captions. A lot of times it's a really simple button that we just push. But in some situations, captions may not be accessible. So we may need to look at, can you get a transcript of a particular video or something? And then there's also audio description for pictures and things like that. I wanted to just share one of the things I recently, or I've been doing for a while, is like, for example, when I post something on Facebook and I post a picture, I put an audio description, because I have several friends that are blind that are on my Facebook feed, and they want to see the cute kitty pictures or the pictures of my garden, and I want to make sure that they have access to that. So if you do something as simple as, in the comments, put that, a description of what it is. Another kind of accessibility might be providing interpreters, like Alex has offered to do for this seminar. So we have ASL interpreters that you all see that are working. We also have other interpreters that are working with our deafblind person attending today, Hannah. But there's also captioning. And Zoom has the captioning abilities has improved greatly. So again, just turning that on, mentioning to people that that can be turned on. Those are all really helpful. Some bigger venues, they have assistive listening devices, and they can be sometimes used for public events. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make events more accessible for people that are deaf or hard of hearing. Universal design is another concept that has gained a lot of I think it's becoming more well known. Universal design is about making things accessible from the beginning. It's when you're designing something, thinking, how can this be designed so that no one needs to ask for an accommodation? That is the most welcoming environment, is when you can just walk in and things are automatically accessible. And another thing I think that really creates accessibility is your attitude. When you can have an attitude of, I don't know the answer, but I'm happy to try to figure it out. That, I think, is one of the most valuable things that we can do. Let's see. Here we go. And finally, I want to just remind folks, ask the person that's asking for the accommodation or asking for the access. They really are the best expert on what they need to be successful and to participate. Whoops. My job at the university where I work is we meet with students and we basically have this conversation about, these are the requirements of the class. They tell us about what areas they have barriers in, and then we work together to figure out a solution. One of the things I love about my job is it's never the same. There's never one way that works the same in every single situation for every single person that's deaf, for every single person that's blind, or every single person that uses a wheelchair. I think being willing to be creative and honest and have conversations about things and admit when you don't know, but be willing to find the answer, goes a long way. And I occasionally just take a breath because I know our interpreters are working really hard, and sometimes they need time. So, and I need time. So we need to remember that when we create a positive experience, we're creating an inclusive experience, and participants are going to feel welcome. And that's our goal. So this is an example of a statement when we were talking about accessible documents and registration materials. This is an example of a statement that you can just put on your registration materials. You know, persons with disabilities who need a reasonable accommodation to participate in this event should contact this person at this phone number or this email. And if you will be providing a sign language interpreter, put that on your registration, because that is marketing in and of itself. Maybe one person that was considering going has a friend that's deaf, and then they see there's an interpreter, so then they ask their friend. So you're increasing the number of people that are coming to your event. The more accessible you are, hopefully the higher turnout you'll have and more people that can be involved. At this time, I want to invite Hannah Furney. Hannah is a student that I've interpreted for several years. And I always think it's good to hear it right from the source. And Hannah can talk a little bit about why advocacy and access matters. And I really appreciate Hannah being willing to come on today and do this. And she's a great resource. So I'll let Hannah talk.
She's a great resource. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep, it's a little quiet, but we can hear you.
And you hear her now. Talk again, Hannah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's about the same. Still, there we go.
My name is Hannah Furney, and I am deafblind, and I use ASL interpreters, and they revoice what people are saying. For example, I can hear women's voices better, and so right now I have two interpreters on Facebook Messenger with me, and they're revoicing what you guys are saying. And then in person, I have a microphone that goes directly to my hearing aids, and I give that to the interpreter. I first was blind at 4.5 months old. And then I became hard of hearing in 2015. I want to, I'm reading this in Braille, so it's taking me a minute. And I'm also learning ASL, but it takes a long time to learn. So that's why I have the voice interpreters. Advocacy is very important to me because I have to do it every day of my life. I need to advocate for different things in my life. For the accessibility at places I attend and events that I go to. Unlike a person without a disability, they don't prepare when they want to go to an event. Sometimes I have to advocate more than other people to get what I need in accessibility. Sometimes people have never met a deafblind person, and they may not know what accommodations we need. We are all different people, and we need different accommodations. I have one example where I recently wanted to participate in an event with Rise, and I asked them for an interpreter, and I had to keep asking because they were hesitant to provide one.
Did you have other things you wanted to share, Hannah?
I'm not done. So
oh, okay. Sorry.
I'm trying to find my part. I recently graduated from Metropolitan State University, and my degree is in individualized studies, advocacy, accessibility, and minority studies. And I want to get a job advocating for people with disabilities. It's very important that people can share the responsibility in advocating, because then we can bring a seat to the table more easily. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hannah, for giving kind of a voice, and
thank you, Hannah, so much.
it helps us all know to have a face to put together and just to have a personal affidavit about why it's so important. And again, I think there's a lot of great talent and ideas that we miss out on when people don't get a chance to participate. And so I've been really fortunate to see a lot of, they're just lights, and I appreciate all of the new information that I learned from people and realize it's important. So thank you, Hannah, for sharing that. So I guess this is another quote that I really like from Maya Angelou. And I hope that after my brief talk today, and again, there's a lot of things that you could go into. I'm sure many of you have heard of the Americans with Disabilities Act and all of the details that it has, but that's hours and hours, and so I'm not even going to go there. If any of you work for organizations or agencies, you may have offices that help handle these things. Like the university I work for has an office that specifically handles that, so that people with disabilities can have their needs met by people that understand the things that they're asking for. Because a lot of times instructors don't know, and they don't know what to ask, and they may actually violate people's rights by asking them personal information that they have no business knowing about. Basically what, a person just needs to let them know is, I have a disability and this is how it impacts my ability to access your event or to participate in this. And then we work on the accommodation. But hopefully after today, a lot of you at least know that there's steps that can be taken. There are resources out there. If you Google document accessibility, you're going to find a wealth of support. If you need an interpreter, I encourage you to reach out to an interpreting agency. They'll do all of the work for you. You just have to give them the day, the time, and the place. And it actually is a lot simpler than people think it is. So I'm going to leave you with this quote. So when you do the best you can do until you know better, and then when you know better, you do better. So I hope that everyone has a chance to go out and do better now. So thank you, Alex, for asking me to participate today, and I look forward to the rest of the presentations. Let me know if you have any questions, and happy to be a resource if people have questions about access in the future. I'm sure Alex could get you in contact with me, and feel free to reach out. I don't know all the answers, but I usually know which direction to point you in.
Thank you so much, Julie. So anybody with any questions, now is the time to speak out.
Any questions?
Or type it in the chat. Go once, going twice, don't see any hands. But again, yes, if you, as Julie mentioned, if you want to reach out to any of our presenters after this, I can provide contact information afterwards.
Alex, I do have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So Julie, if that was a great catch of, if you're going to have an event, then put the word out. What do people need? Obviously the most important part of that is being able to provide it. And then it's also a good marketing tool. But so let's say somebody says that they need something that's pretty exotic. What do you do? Like, who do you contact?
What do you mean by exotic?
I need an elevator. I need an elevator placed in the building that doesn't have one. You know what I mean? Like, just, I don't know. I remember, I worked in HR my 3/4 of my life, and the whole accessibility thing became after ADA started and all that, and it was challenging because we had to figure out there were all kinds of different things people needed. And so and this is with companies with huge resources who then balked at those things. So I was just wondering if there are any kind of like things that you could expect people saying that will put you in a position of having to like try to wrangle it, call somebody, figure it out, or is it pretty straightforward? I need a translator.
Well, hopefully that's straightforward, but sometimes you need to refer them to the Disability Law Center. And they need to look at, you know, filing a formal complaint.
No, I'm not talking about if it happens in a company. I'm talking about we're doing a workshop and we want to advertise it. And then we get a call that says, I need a special something because I have this rare disability or something like that. What do you do?
Well, then I would sit down and I would talk with them about and say, okay, what is it specifically that you can access about this workshop? So sometimes it's a matter of, you know, and I think it's you talk about what are the specifics of the things that the functional, you know, limitations that you have because of your disability that you can access. So if it's a matter of I can't read the printed documents, then maybe you look at sending them to them electronically a day before, so they have a chance to load them onto their technology. Or maybe you have a person that can read the documents for them, so that they can, you know, someone that could sit next to them and read them during the presentation. So sometimes there's a lot of really low tech ways to solve some of those things. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
without more specifics, I guess you know, you have to get specific sometimes, but at the same time, you can't ask questions like, you know, you really shouldn't ask, you know, what is your disability? Or because a lot of times we're lay people and we're not medical doctors. We don't understand what a diagnosis for different, like if a person has a mental health issue and they take a certain medication that has a impact on their ability to focus and concentrate, you know, that's none of our business. What we need to know is, I need to have a printed agenda before the meeting so that I can track and follow. You know, that's all that I need to know.
Right. So creative problem solving. I just wondered if there was a phone number you'd call and say, hey, I've got this situation. Can you help organizations that might help with disability accommodations? I didn't know if there was a phone number or if there was a source you could call that actually provides those services.
I mean, and it depends on, you know, what they're asking. In the Minnesota Department of Human Services, they have a lot of information on their website about different types of disabilities. You know, if it's someone that has a hearing loss or vision loss, they might be able to provide some support.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally helps.
Good.
I didn't know what I didn't know.
None of us do. None of us do.
All right. So, any other questions? Looks like Kat had a question about what's a good follow-up question if someone asks ambiguously, what accommodations do you provide, unquote, as opposed to being very clear about what they need.
Well, I guess I would start with, what accommodations are you requesting?
You would say, what accommodations are you requesting?
Kat, did that answer your question?
Kat, did that answer your question?
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
The person has to be able to, you know, they have to ask for something. You know, of course, you want to make your events and meetings and things as accessible as possible, but if they don't ask for an accommodation, you can't provide one, is another thing too. I mean, it's great to have an interpreter at every event, and I applaud Alex for wanting to be inclusive and having interpreters, ASL interpreters today. But it's not always possible financially. But if you don't ask, you're not going to get what you need.